Alright, let's play another chess game here. So, as always, we're doing our 15-10 time control on our same account here. And let's wait for our opponent and see which side of the board we're playing here. Alright, so we're facing a 1579 rated opponent as white. So we'll play e4 here, and e5, the classic response to e4, knight f3, and then if knight c6, we'll go with the Ruy Lopez, and this is another Philidor defense. So we've done a video with Philidor defense before, but my response is going to be the book response, which is d4, and we have f6 to guard in the center here. So f6 is not theoretical. It weakens, I guess, the king side here a little bit because of his diagonal here being weakened. But there's no immediate way, I don't think, to prosecute a king side attack in this, I guess, variation. So let's see. We can take and open the center immediately. Probably is not a terrible idea here. We can just invite this center to be open. I'm going to keep it simple with another developing move, knight c3 here, and just invite the center to be opened, I guess, in the long run. And bishop c4 is probably a good move here. Bishop to c4. We have knight to d7, or knight to e7, excuse me. Bringing the knight in front of the king here. Yeah, this dude is not playing very theoretically, so we're going to kind of have to just common sense our way through this opening. So, I mean, this move, it's kind of just blocking in his own bishop here, and making it harder for his king side to be developed. I mean, if he ever castles king side, he probably will be like immediately destroyed by any sort of king side attack. Seems like to me, but I guess there's two ways we could kind of play this in the long run. Is shut down the position and kind of play it positionally, which I don't like as much, because eventually he is gonna unlock his king side. I think we should wait for the position to be opened and then use our open lines toward the king and an advantage in development in order to try to get a checkmating attack against our opponent here. So with that in mind, we're just going bishop c4 here, just putting another piece on the board that's going to eye towards the king here. And we have knight to g6, which further is another move that is moving the knight. Maybe he's moving in to f4 here, which is probably not the most pleasant for us, but we could always just take with our bishop if he does such a thing. So now I think, let's see, how do we want to attack it? We could start an attack with h4 and h5, just like already using the bad placement of his knight here, trying to expand on the king side. I kind of like that. We could play bishop to e3, but then if he moves his knight into e4, we're kind of just forced to move our bishop twice to take it, and it's kind of not as ideal maybe as using this tempo to push h4. And I'm not really worried about our king's safety yet, because his pieces are so underdeveloped right now. I think h4 is a good move to start an attack towards the king side here. Already using his knight on g6 as sort of a target to get our own advances here up towards the king side. And I mean, his bishop is already blocked in by his pawns, and he can't advance to g3 to fianchetto it. I think it's already like very bad for black here, and we have two choices here. We can take with a queen, but that walks into knight c6 with tempo, another developing move. We can take with a knight, which I think is more ideal here. And what he's done is pretty much removed his only pawn controlling the center here, so it might not be a good day for him here if we can actually play accurately. Knight to e5. I think we retreat the bishop is a good idea. Where do we retreat it to? I want to keep it along this diagonal, most likely. I don't want to retreat to d3 and give it up to the knight. Yeah, I don't want to protect it, although that's not a terrible idea. I would rather keep the bishop on the board for when the position opens up, because I think there's going to be severe consequences on the light squares when the position eventually opens up here. So we'll drop the bishop back to b3, I guess. And his knight is still kind of out there just as a target to maybe even f4. And then like a bishop advance. And we might even want to think about castling queen side in this sort of position. So bishop to g4, I think we can just play like f3 to guard and kick his bishop away with tempo, and this also reinforces our central pawn here. And we'll see what his plan is with that bishop. And then we also have, depending on where it retreats to, he's kind of giving us a square for our knight here. That's going to be, could be pivotal in our kingside attack. He retreats back to d7, which I think is reasonable, you know, guarding preemptively any checks against the king from there. And yeah, and still guarding the f5 square from our knight to get in. But I think now we have a great lead in development, and I think we're going to just further our lead, further make improving moves here. We could even think about starting an attack with like g4 here, g5, because this pawn is guarded by our knight and by our queen. But that is it's not very risky, but it's a little bit more risky. That I'm sure like the engine probably would like something like this. But I think the most simple, maybe the most simple way to continue this is just bishop to f4, and we're just like kind of flexing our development against black here. Let's see, knight to c6. Should we trade is a question. It's a valid question. Probably not. We probably don't want to trade, and there's really no reason to, because the queen is guarding. We could take, perhaps, and we could also even maybe play let's see our options. We have knight to e6 as an option, which probably isn't that great, to be honest. We have knight to f5. His bishop takes. I don't really like that his bishop can take. We have knight takes. We have queen to d2. Just inviting him to take. We get our queen to d4. Then if he drops back with his knight attacking our queen, we can just evacuate out of there with our queen. We do have just takes. I don't see any tactics in the position yet. So I think maybe queen d2, preparing a queenside castle, is reasonable here. And then if he takes, we just take back with the knight. Or with the queen, sorry. With the queen there. And then we can prepare a castle here on the queen side. And I think that will complete our development. And then after that we can start an attack. And we want to open the position up somehow, if we can, in the center, in order to exploit his lack of development here and eventually checkmate his king. So we'll see how this position develops from here. I think knight back to c6 is kind of a valid option, maybe for him. Yeah, queen to e7, preparing castling maybe, but I think castling immediately is going to run into queen takes a7. So, and he's still having problems with his bishop. So I think just castling, continuing with our plan, is going to be the way to go here. We castle, and now he's kind of discouraged from castling on this side, and he's going to have severe problems if he wants to castle on this side. So I think the fact of this game so far is that he's just having trouble developing here because of his very passive play in the opening, I would say. And we're going to have a lot more straightforward plans, I believe, in order to try to attack this position eventually. So the thing that immediately stands out to me here is knight to d5. I mean, it looks almost crushing immediately because of the amount of targets we have in this position. And it's a good square in general for the knight. So I'm just gonna, it doesn't even require that much calculation, I don't think, to put the knight there. He has to move the queen, and we can worry about it later if he kicks our knight out. Yeah, but this just looks like this is fried chicken or something on the board, and then we can try to pick targets here. Let's see. H5 is a way to try to, but then H4 takes. Yeah, I think H5 might be a way to try to open up the board on this side. What if C6? Maybe we shouldn't be that worried about. Let's see, H5, an attempt to open up the board on a flank. And then a flank attack here. And we have the bailout option, I guess you could call it, of taking here. The problem is it comes with tempo. So we could even drop our bishop back and prepare a move like F4, just insisting on breaking open this file here. Sorry, I'm like calculating in my head all the possibilities we could get into here, because it looks like we're probably going to run into c6 on the next move. But let's see. I don't think it's that scary. Alright, now we can play something like f4. This knight can come around. We're not really successful in our attempt to break apart the position here, but I mean, let's see. f4, his knight comes, and then somehow we're opening this position. We gotta open this position somehow, I think is what the position is like screaming for right now. Could even like okay, we've successfully opened a singular file against his king now. So now we continue with our attack. Okay. c6, and I mean we have this square, c3 again. I don't see any way effectively to advance without blundering, so I think maybe this is not bad. Maybe e3, because it guards this square and it looks at getting into f4, and also, yeah, I think this is probably a little bit more accurate than c3, but it's hard to say for me. I judge it mostly based off this square. But I think now that the position's opening up, now we have some opportunities, shall we say, to attack here. Okay, he's offering a queen trade, which I think a queen trade would most likely benefit black here. I think we don't want to trade queens. However, we might not really have that much of a choice. We can take the knight actually, because if he takes a queen, then we actually take it back with our bishop. Is a tactical sequence I'm noticing. But also if he takes back here, we've successfully maybe opened up avenues of using this square that's protected by the knight. So I think that is a decent route to go. And if he takes back with the wrong pawn, he's blundering this. He has to take back with this, and then we're opening up the light squares here to be attacked. So, but does that blunder the knight with check? And I think it might. It might just blunder the knight with check. So let's actually check here. Knight. Okay. Is there a concrete way in which we can create this position to attack, like create this position in order to attack like weak pawns here in an endgame type scenario? I think, let's calculate. Takes, knight jumps here, and the idea of that is to attack these weak pawns, and if he advances, our knight comes here with a fork on these pieces. So that is a possibility I'm seeing here in order to engineer kind of a favorable endgame. I think that is probably the route, a safe route to take that will win. So, because we're attacking both this with 2 pawns and this with 2 pawns. And he has just basically, I mean, he has a bishop pair, but he has more weaknesses here that he has to worry about. And his king is also kind of goofy there in the center of the board. And I think just white in this position is just more suited to win in an endgame type scenario. Okay, bishop, we can still take, or can we? Because we have to move the, well, I think we can still take, move the rook. Let's see, take. No, we can't because the bishop is attacking. We can take this. He takes, we take. Could take the pawn, and then if he takes, take back with a rook. Sorry, if he takes his rook, and then his bishop has to drop out, and then we come here with the rook. So I think this capture sequence just is kind of favorable. Wait, I guess he has that. Something I didn't realize here. Yeah, I think that might just be not good for us. Yeah, I think that's not good. But in this position, let's see, what are we going to be down here? We're going to be down maybe a rook exchange. Yeah, let's not get our knight trapped. Let's see. It is more favorable to lose the exchange here than to lose a knight, I believe. So we'll return the knight to the center and then lose the exchange and then go from there. And we'll play a point of material down, see if we can somehow save this position here. We're definitely losing. Yeah, I got a little bit dubious with my takes. We should have probably just moved the rook. But now he basically immediately blunders a tactic here with knight takes, with check, and then we win the rook here. So, because we're x-raying the rook. So we kind of just got lucky, it would seem. And this bishop is still under attack. Yeah, that's kind of unfortunate on his part because I'm pretty sure he's just like outright better in a position like that. But anyways, let's return our bishop. Here, I think is a good square. I mean, we're guarding, and then we're able to set up kind of a fortress on the light squares. He still has a dark squared bishop, so this is kind of an opposite colored bishop endgame with rooks, except I'm just 2 pawns up here. I have an extra pawn here and here if you look on the board. But yeah, I probably did not play the middle game very accurate, but we'll analyze it after the engine to see like what went wrong. Like I'm sure there were opportunities we could have just opened up the board and like had actual threats of a checkmate attack, but for some reason it was just hard for me to find it. Whatever, so we have check. Go back here, king b1. Yeah, king to e7, drop our bishop back. I don't think this is too careless, and then we have g4, just solidifying like a fortress. If he's not careful, we have this rook check winning the pawn, and we just have to, it's unlikely, but we just make room and make sure we aren't mated on the back rank. But I think our opponent kind of got excited after they found that tactic with our knight. Yeah, that was just, I don't know why I didn't see that. Okay, rook to b6 guards the piece there. Okay, we're gonna go b3, and then we can eventually, we're not in really a rush to do this, but we can get our rook in. And eventually, you know, this is to create an avenue for our king to get an all hands on deck solution here, where our king is even used as an attacker, I think is the point of that move, because he can't use this diagonal really with his pawn on e5. So yeah, I mean, something like g4, there's no reason not to play something like this. It just solidifies my bishop here. And it's just an extra pawn we have. He can't en passant because it's a bishop. And then we got our rook coming into his back rank here eventually. And his bishop really can only guard 2 pawns at a time. So once we are able to kick the rook out, well, I mean, it's just winning. So this is just, it might take a while, but it's just a winning endgame. Go like this. Well, let's not get too wild here. King drops back, and then we have c4. And if he doesn't guard, we have this picking up the pawn. If he doesn't advance or something. But I think we're probably just going to play this anyway and get behind the pawn if he does something like that. Okay. And now we can just trade rooks and use our pawn majority here to win. It should be winning here. We got this, and we got b. Yeah, you can't use this square. We just have to make sure we don't blunder any pawns here, because opposite colored bishop endgames can be a little bit scary. For instance, he moves his bishop back around here, and somehow we're blundering if our pawns are on the dark squares. So we're going to have to use our bishop kind of to ensure our promotion eventually. I believe is how we're going to have to play this. Just restrict squares from the king is basically how we got to use this bishop. And I don't think black is able to hold this unless he's able to build some sort of fortress. But I think 2 pawns should be enough to hold. Yeah. And then the bishop could even be used as a tool to like lure his king away from the squares, which he needs to be guarding. But yeah. I think we just get our king around the light squares here, and then we can push our pawn. Because there's no way he can stop me, really, from getting around the pawns this way, I don't think. And if he takes, we just take back with a bishop. And this bishop is guarding this square pretty nicely here. So we're going to ensure pass pawn and then just take our king down the board, hopefully to win the other pawns here. This is the way we're going to do this. Kind of a boring endgame. Should just be straight up winning for white. All right. We get into the right square here. King there. Play something like that. We ensure our pawn is advanced. We take, and then he can't take back with a bishop because his king is not guarding the square. And if his king, let's see. I think we can just go ahead and play this move right away. And we can maybe even play like that. Come back around. Yeah, I'm going to use this pawn kind of as a blockade for this move, and then come back around here. So his king is blocked from using any of these squares for that turn, and then we can move like I don't know, something like that, and just return back here. Return back around, cement this pawn in, and then eventually win here. Now we have to gain opposition somehow and escort this pawn, I believe. Because if he moves his bishop, he's basically dropping this pawn wherever he moves it. Yeah. I mean, I think we just take this pawn as the simplest way. And then we can escort this pawn up the board. Perhaps. Yeah, let's gain opposition like that so we're not on a dark square and get pinned. And then we can go like this. This king moves up there, and then we have this square. And then it's basically over. Yeah, it's kind of just over. Let's see, c4, king there. No, not c4, e6, king d6. Yeah. Maybe this is a draw, actually. Maybe I blundered somehow. Because we can't advance this pawn. Damn. Because his bishop will just come back around to take. Man, maybe I fouled this up somehow. This might be our first draw, even though we're 2 pawns up. Yeah, and I don't want to blunder something like this. I think this is going to be a draw here. All right. I guess we take a draw. Damn. One brilliant, one great, 31 best moves. So I guess it's not. I guess we didn't play too inaccurately, but let's see. Alright, Philidor defense up to the point f6. It's mostly book moves, and f6 is kind of a mistake. We move knight c3, normal development, knight e7, bishop c4, knight g6. Yeah, h4, it says pretty good idea. Takes, knight takes, and we're +2. So bishop b3, f3, yeah, definitely. We're still, heavily at an advantage here. Bishop f4, it says is the first mistake. f4, it says. I guess, yeah, I didn't really consider this move because we just had moved this pawn, but f4 would have been a good way to kick his only active piece and start an attack, but also h5, trying to open up the center more early than we did there. Knight e6 was always a solid move. Knight takes, queen takes, queen e7, castles. And I think we went with knight d5, yeah, looks just crushing to me. h5, I mean, still looks, and we didn't take. I guess there must be something concrete after taking with the bishop here. Because I saw f takes and I thought, oh, well, this queen is kicked away. And I didn't see a lot of usefulness, but actually this, discovery here is devastating, setting up this queen c4, and also this threat here on c7. Yeah, that's something I didn't notice. Was e3 the best square to retreat to? Yeah, it says by far. Knight e3. And then we tried to engineer a favorable endgame with an advantage for us. So we did that. Bishop takes e5. F takes e, queen takes b6, and then the move knight to c4, which looked, the engine still gives a good advantage here. Bishop takes, a correct move was actually knight takes d6, but you see, I was worried after something like this, but the reality of that is it just steps into a discovery, which is more than favorable for us. And I just didn't see that tactically, I guess. Knight takes was a mistake because now both our knight and our rook are under attack. So I guess knight back to c4 is the only way to return this to an equal position. And this is the first tactic in the game it looks like I don't miss, is just the straight up knight takes and then bishop takes the rook here. Yeah, I mean, awful game by me, I guess. Knight to c4, knight takes, bishop takes rook, and then we return. I mean, this was certainly clearly winning. For white here, but just taking the rooks off the board was probably my biggest mistake, because there are obscure ways in which our opponent did find, I guess, in order to build like a defensive fortress in opposite colored bishop endgames in which one player has no way to make progress. And so it looks like, let's see the evaluation here. I mean, even like back here, I guess the engine says it's pretty easy to win, but c6, I definitely missed a win here, I guess, with king f7. Wait a minute, the engine is taking a while to load. Maybe the engine... How early back was it a draw? I mean, this... So basically from the point where I took where I took the pawn on e5, I should have... The alternative in my mind was protecting this pawn and then like going after both of these pawns with my king and maybe advancing, but even then, yeah, I don't know. And then using this just as an avenue for promotion, but yeah, obviously we were winning most of the game up until the point where I blundered in the endgame, basically allowed him to create a fortress for himself. But that was another Philidor game. And now, yeah, let's do one more game after this. See if we can get something more substantive there, some more theory we can analyze. So we have e4 from the white pieces, and we're playing a set damn near 1800 rated player here after our first draw. So knight f3, we play d6. And then this is going into kind of a Najdorf Sicilian here, as long as he plays knight c3. All right, we have a Najdorf variation Sicilian, which is probably my favorite. And then bishop e2 initiates the Opocensky variation, which the response is e5 here. As knight goes back to b3, and we're going to play bishop to e6 here. And the idea of bishop to e6 is to guard this square from immediately getting taken, especially with like move like bishop to g5, which is pinning the knight. We want to maintain control of the d5 square, at least for our at least so a knight doesn't land there permanently. It's fine if maybe a pawn gets there, but we certainly don't want a knight there overlording our position and blockading our pawn. So bishop g5, we can play bishop to e7 here, I believe. It's not a bad way to go about this. All right, takes, I don't actually think is a book move to this variation, but I might be wrong. I could just be mistaken and not studied enough Najdorf. But I think we just take back with a bishop, and this is actually like a beneficial diagonal. And if we go back to what I said about the knight, we don't want the knight in our position. I don't think that's very beneficial there. Queen takes. Maybe we should have just ignored the knight even. But yeah, maybe it was a mistake. Maybe I'm totally mistaken here. But we can now develop our knight to c6 because there's no pawn here. And I'm expecting a queenside castle. No. Well, now we can castle, maybe play bishop to g5, discouraging a queenside castle, but he can still move his rook there too. We could play bishop to e7, preemptively guarding and prepare f5, but let's castle first. Let's castle first. Can play maybe bishop e7 eventually, and eventually f5 maybe would be a way to start our own attack towards the king's side here. But he is definitely clamping down on this weakness of the backward pawn on d6 here is what he is going for. And I feel that it's probably about equal unless I made some sort of just opening mistake here with this backward pawn, because a rook is about to land on d1, and if we're not careful, he's going to even triple up rooks here. Yeah, so I think, let's see. Knight to e7 is a move here. We could eventually play kicking and then maybe pushing our own d5, but it has to be set up because we have a weakness on b7 here. So ways we could set it up are queen c7, which is kind of a move we want to play anyway, and then it also frees up a square to play rook to d8 there, supporting an advance of our pawn. And notice this other pawn is guarded nicely by our bishop there, because I don't want to keep this weakness on the board for many more moves here. If we can, we want to get rid of it with a push like d5, if we can support it well enough with like a knight drop back to e7 and have potentially perchance a rook here on d8 to back it up. Thing is, if he has a rook of his own on d1, that's going to be kind of hard to achieve here. Or a move like c4 makes it harder to achieve because he's indirectly discouraging the move by adding another defender to that square. Let's see. We have knight to e7 still, but what does that accomplish? It kicks the queen kind of temporarily, would be a true statement. But I don't want to spend this whole game trying to guard weaknesses here. I want to create an attack of my own. Let's start with knight to e7. And then maybe we can reroute our knight to f5, a good square here. f4. And our rook can still come to d8 here, not that, because he has cleared the way for a knight reroute. And notice if he moves this pawn here, we're going to have ideas of a discovery. Let's move our knight up to f4, eye that square. And he guards that square, immediately shutting down our idea. Now I'm tempted to play bishop back to e7 and play f5 here, trying to break apart the king side a little bit. Remove one defender of the square, and maybe double tower here along the f file would be ideas of this move, and also preemptively add a defender to d6 here. So that is what I am looking at here. I think f4 on his part would probably be a little bit weakening if he tries to beat us to the punch here, because of this diagonal being open against the king. But maybe he has ways in which he can deal with that. We will see. And c4 I think is a good move as well, because it's preventing us from playing b5 as well, another typical Sicilian idea. So maybe my early capture of the knight was actually like inaccurate from the start. Maybe I should have ignored the knight and let it maybe take the bishop, but we'll see. We'll analyze it after the game. But obviously this guy is no joke if he's 1764. He seems to know his theory pretty well. But it's not like we have no ideas of our own. We still have, I think, this key idea of pushing f5, maybe even f4, trying by force to get a square for our knight, or opening up the king side, doubling up, and then trying to attack this diagonal here. Alright, rook to c1. Maybe he has prospects of pushing this pawn here. Is that dangerous? To be honest, I kind of would not mind having that pawn traded off, because it's getting rid of our weakness. So I think we can continue with our plan here. f4 takes, rook takes. If bishop moves here, that's a skew of our rook to our knight, but we could always drop back our rook and recapture with our rook here. Also adding a rook to the g file along his king. So I think f5 might be decent here. And then if his bishop drops back preemptively, I think maybe f4 would be decent. Okay, we have an opening here. And another note is we have less defenders of the d5 square. A game of squares is really appropriate probably for this guy's name, because he's been really clamping down on the d5 square. That's really how you got to play chess, I think, is just play it like focus on squares a lot of the time. Gotta focus on key squares, and that's how you're gonna gain an advantage in the game. But dropping back to f6 I think is decent. He doesn't have a dark squared bishop to exploit. And if he takes the knight now, it's kind of discouraging him from taking the knight, because now we can put a tower there where the knight is and have it aim toward the king. And we're looking to get this other rook developed either to f8 or to c8 or maybe even to d8. Knight there, that's good. Let's see. I think we have to at this point decide what square is best to develop our rook to. This bishop is kind of locked back in here for now. So maybe even we want to reroute our knight yet again before we bring our rook to f8 back to e6, but then that's putting it on the diagonal that our king is on. So I don't, man, this knight does not have a lot of good prospects, and his knight is about to land on e4. So this is, that might be devastating for me. I think maybe rook d8 here is most appropriate to try to push d5 eventually. Let's see, because we want to get rid of this weakness here. And his knight is probably going to land on e4. Our rook may have to retreat. This is a tough game, I will say. Bishop, wow. I thought his knight would have been better placed there, but his bishop is now eyeing this square to blockade my pawns, and also to discourage the d5 push. That's pretty expert move. Yeah. We can't push b5 here because we still have problems with our queen being along this x-ray. However, we can start maybe developing threats of our own here if we go rook to f8 and then queen hitting both of these squares. So let's try that. Because now our d5 push is like, it's no longer has any probability of even happening because his bishop is going to move there, blockade us. So we're kind of switching our strategy here in order to adjust for this move, bishop to e4, trying to centralize the bishop on d5. Very tough. And then if we can go queen to b6, we're eyeing this with 3 attackers and eyeing this, so we could potentially be winning material there if his knight is still on d2. But yeah, we'll see. Yeah, c4, definitely be a mistake. Queen b6. I mean, I feel like I'm just like, some of these moves are just like punching at air somehow. Because now queen b6, I mean, well, queen b6 is alright. But it doesn't come with the same force as it did before. It doesn't come with the same force it did before. Because now he can just simply add a defender here and we have no other alternate attacks. We can maybe centralize our queen. Yeah. Can maybe centralize our queen. And maybe we can reroute our knight here if we drop our bishop back to d8. But it kind of feels like I'm just swinging at air here. I think rook to d8, freeing up a spot for our knight. I mean, we've moved this rook multiple times, but freeing up a spot for our knight to eventually come reroute itself somehow is decent here. We could maybe eventually centralize our queen. But it's been tough trying to play around this weakness of d6, and our opponent has been giving us a very hard time defending this square on d5. He's been controlling it the whole game very tenaciously, which is probably what you should be doing in the Opocensky variation. So that's good on him. Because it's been keeping this bishop, you know, going the whole time. And maybe the lesser of evils here was to let this knight be taken by dropping our rook back in order to have this bishop be more active. I mean, we'll see. We'll see what our opponent's plan is. Our opponent is taking their time by a lot on this move. Alright, knight back to b1. Wow. That does not look very active, but I think the idea is to get a rook. On this square. No, we can't play h5. Let's see. Could maybe play a5, trying to chip away at these pawns here. And he plays b4. Yeah, I don't see where our knight is like going in the long run. Could move to f1. maybe move there. Maybe we have to move our king to h8 first so we can get our knight like back without getting pinned. I don't know, this is insane to me. Now he's threatening. Okay, his maneuver was, his knight maneuver was to get his knight actually to d4 here. So I think queen here would be a blunder probably now at this point, and we have to make sure that we aren't getting forked or pinned to the king. So let's see, how can we do that? I don't see many ways in which we can, honestly. And even if we move our rook or something, I'm noticing that our queen is like in serious danger of getting trapped as well, because all of these squares will be guarded. In fact, we might already be trapped here, because queen d4, we run into like rook goes there. And then we can't really go anywhere. I mean, you can go like queen a7, but this is like, I don't know, pretty pathetic. Queen c7 runs into the fork, same ass fork. Yeah, I think this is like resignable, honestly, for me. And we might just have to like give up the fork at this point. I think this is essentially resignable. Some strong positional play here. Let's see if we can find a way to save this. Formulate a plan of some sort here in order to try to fight back. Knight c7. If he puts his bishop there, alright, he's not in danger of pinning us. Or he's not in danger of forking us anymore if he puts his bishop there. So we'll move knight there and hopefully create some counter play somehow to knight goes there. Knight is. Knight. Yeah, I think it's just over after, because ironically it's like knight d5, he actually wants to take the bishop rather than the queen, I believe, and then return to his square. Because if he takes the queen, then I take the queen with check and fork him. He actually wants to take the bishop. And that way, okay, maybe we have a counterplay here. Maybe we have counterplay. With knight takes, our king moves to f8. And then he has to move the queen. Wait, what? Okay. All right, he's up in exchange. We've cemented the position here. He's up in exchange, but I mean, we somehow got out of the position like somewhat alive. We're just down in exchange here. And it shouldn't be that hard for him to convert. Yeah, this is... this has been a good game by him, for sure. But we have this knight here. And let's not get too flustered here. So obviously the immediate threat is on h7. So we kind of have to play defensively and react for now, I think. And move h6. Now his king is moving to a good square, a diagonal that's controlled, so there's no goofy discovery attacks if he moves his pawn here. I think it's good. Yeah, and I don't have a light squared bishop here either, so I think maybe... I don't know how to fight against this position, if I'm being honest. There's not much fighting I can do. I can try attacking his rook. We definitely want to keep this knight here. I mean, this knight is like our only salvation in this position. Maybe we can get some sort of queen reroute an attack on the king side going here. A shot in the dark, but we'll see. We will see. And yeah, we can't play queen f7 immediately because we get pinned. Yeah, we're gonna get stuck like Chuck in the corner here. I think f4 is just pretty devastating. That's also pretty devastating. Because the threat is just very simple. It's just he's going to move his bishop back and deliver checkmate. And if I don't have a square to escape, I'm just going to get mated straight up. Yeah, I think it's going to be over pretty soon. This plan is just to move to... Probably just move there and break open the position and mate me. But yeah, certainly taking his time on these moves. Certainly taking his time. But yeah, let's go back to the... Okay, never mind. Rook to e1. Queen to... I don't want to blunder this pawn if I go there. But then I'm blundering this. And then if I go there, blundering that, I think. Well, let's just do it. Go for the queen trade. And just try to last decent amount of time before we get checkmated here. Bishop comes back, we go like win this pawn. I mean, he's just, yeah, he's just winning with this move. The rook takes d6, guarding the bishop. Yep. Alright, I think it's time to resign. Good game to our opponent. I do not have time to need to play another game, but that was a very instructive game on our part, so let's see where the mistakes were. Yeah, and I have a sense that taking the knight early on, or even allowing the knight, might have been our first mistake. Bishop e6 is a book move. Bishop g5. Bishop takes. Bishop takes is correct. Knight d5. Yeah, I had a feeling I was supposed to ignore the knight, and that was after I made the move with knight d7 was correct. Bishop takes, allowing, I forgot about queen takes, and this kind of cements a permanent weakness in our position here of d6. But it allows knight c6, but that is not enough compensation because we have really effective targets. I guess the way to counterattack this with the engine was a5. Wow. What is the idea behind? I don't. a5, queen d3, g6. What is the idea behind a5? Let's say they make some irrelevant move. Just to play a4. And then maybe knight to d4. Yeah. So I guess a5 was a positional way to strike back. Knight e7. And then knight g5, but he just shut down all my plans with g3. Very, very good about controlling squares here. We have bishop g7, rook c8, f5, trying to continue with our plan, but this was a mistake because of allowing bishop to d3, and knight d2. It was a nice little reroute of his knight to try to, I mean, he's just controlling this, and basically, like, by here, it's nearly resignable due to how passive my pieces are forced to be, and due to his control. Knight d5, knight d4, takes, bishop takes. Yeah, and he's basically just winning by this point. So, yeah, I hope that was instructive on how to play Sicilian when they give you control of the d5 square. I hope you enjoyed the video.